Hey guys, tonight we plunge into the dark labyrinth of King Henry VIII's 6 notorious marriages, the most polygamous monarch in England's history. Was the king truly a womanizer driven by a passion for beauty, or did these queens harbour fatal flaws or commit cursed offences that led to their downfall? The dazzling lights of the palace stand in stark contrast to the annulment trials and the cold sentences of death. Trust me, you won't survive it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment letting me know where you are and what time it is in your local time zone. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon, also known as Princess Catalina, was the first wife of King Henry VIII and the only queen consort who failed to produce a lasting male heir. She was born in the year 1485 at Alcantara, in Spain. The youngest surviving daughter of King Ferdinand, II of Aragon, and Queen Isabella I of Castile, 2 monarchs who unified the Iberian Peninsula and forged a powerful empire from childhood. Catherine was educated under the strict protocols of the Spanish court. In addition to studying basic Latin grammar, she received instruction in history, theology, rudimentary medicine, and refined accomplishments such as embroidery, music, and dance. This blend of scholarly training and genteel skills made Catherine the ideal model of a European Renaissance princess. Intelligent, graceful, and virtuous. When Catherine turned 8 years old, her father and mother arranged for her to serve as a key political concession to strengthen the Anglo-Spanish alliance. On the 19th of May, in the year 1499, her proxy marriage to Arthur, Prince of Wales, the eldest son of King Henry VII, was solemnized in Toledo, with 2 English royal envoys reading the vows on the couple's behalf. Their relationship began primarily on paper. Catherine and Arthur exchanged letters in Latin, demonstrating mutual respect and a commitment to mastering a common language. For 7 years, they maintained this epistolary decorum, though both remembered the instruction that upon meeting in person they would converse in their native tongues, a detail that led to confusion when they first met face to face. In the autumn of 1501, Catherine travelled to England and met Prince Arthur at Ludlow Castle on the 4th of November. They conversed in Latin, but their divergent pronunciations caused embarrassment, requiring interpreters to mediate. A few months later, the sweating sickness pandemic ravaged the region, claiming Arthur's life on the 2nd of April in 1502. When he was only 16 years old, Catherine, then 17, recovered from her own illness and quietly mourned the collapse of the dynastic union. Shortly thereafter, in order to preserve the alliance and royal honour, Catherine petitioned the Holy See for a papal dispensation, dispensatio papalis, permitting her to marry Arthur's brother, Prince Henry. Leveraging her close ties to Pope Julius II and her nephew Charles V, the Vatican granted the exceptional pardon, even though her first marriage had never been consummated. However, with King Henry VII's death at the close of 1509, Catherine had to wait until Prince Henry ascended the throne as King Henry VIII and formally annulled her widowhood before their grand wedding on the 23rd of June in 1509 by then. She was 23 years old. Her youthful heart brimmed with renewed hope as she vowed to live by the motto, humble and loyal virtues, that endeared her to both the English populace and the nobility. In her early years as queen consort, Catherine quickly demonstrated exceptional political acumen and moral integrity. She and her husband processed from the Tower of London to Westminster Abbey on the 24th of June, 1509 for their coronation, where the Archbishop of Canterbury placed crowns upon their heads. Catherine received the pomegranate emblem, a symbol of fertility and rebirth, emphasizing her role in securing Tudor succession. petite in stature, with alabaster skin, hair tinged between gold and reddish brown, and clear blue eyes. Catherine was celebrated as one of the most beautiful women in Europe. Her measured speech, graceful deportment, and linguistic talents fluent in Latin and Spanish, and gradually learning English, made her an invaluable interpreter at court and a guardian of the royal reputation. Catherine's influence peaked in 1513, when Henry VIII led a campaign in France, and she was appointed regent with full powers in England. Under her banner, English forces met the Scottish invaders at the Battle of Flodden, securing a resounding victory, while Catherine herself was pregnant. Her letter to the king, accompanied by a blood-stained piece of cloth from the fallen Scottish king's banner, cemented her legacy as a courageous queen, capable of guiding the nation through political storms. Catherine's quest for a male heir wove a narrative of hope and heartbreak. She endured 7 pregnancies but bore only one surviving child, Princess Mary, with the remainder ending in stillbirths or early deaths. Despite repeated disappointment, Catherine maintained patience and humility. Never blaming the king, she encouraged royal physicians to advance medical care and was commemorated in contemporary poems and aphorisms as a model mother of a prince and benevolent queen, reinforcing her motto, humble and loyal, on medals and reliefs. Over more than 2 decades of marriage, Catherine and Henry VIII built a prosperous Tudor dynasty, granting charters, constructing palaces, and forging alliances with European powers. Although their union ultimately disintegrated amid divorce scandals and sweeping religious reforms, Catherine of Aragon remains etched in history as a steadfast, devoted, and principled queen, an enduring emblem of Renaissance womanhood. Her signature, Catherine, with a distinctive K, and the pomegranate motif still adorn a memorial plaque at Westminster Abbey, reminding future generations of an emperor's wife, revered not merely for power, but for her virtue and genuine heart. After their lavish wedding on the 23rd of June in 1509, Empress Catherine and King Henry VIII arrived at the Tower of London, where they spent the final night before the coronation ceremony. The ancient fortress was resplendently decorated with stationary banners, a scarlet carpet, and crystal chandeliers, casting flickering reflections on the stone walls. By the torchlight set in the windows, Catherine, then still Princess Catalina of Aragon, and Henry conversed in hushed tones with their attendants, alternately anxious and exhilarated at the prospect of the momentous day ahead. The next morning, the 24th of June in 1509, the royal procession departed from the Tower of London and moved toward Westminster Abbey, along a venerable avenue lined with trees and rows of solemn soldiers, to the beat of opening drums and the clarion calls of trumpets echoing across the great plaza. The Archbishop of Canterbury presided over the sacred anointing ceremony, applying holy oil to their foreheads, chests, and shoulders, in accordance with religious tradition to solemnize their divine authority. Following this rite, 2 golden crowns set with precious gemstones were placed upon Catherine's and Henry's heads amid thunderous acclaims, marking the dawn of the mighty Tudor dynasty. On the day of the coronation, Empress Catherine donned a pearly white ceremonial robe embroidered with deep red pomegranate motifs, an ancient emblem of fertility, abundance, and rebirth. Each plump pomegranate, like a gleaming pearl, embodied the hope for vigorous heirs to continue the royal line. Complementing the robe, the crown glittered with thousands of sapphires, emeralds, and rubies, sparkling in the sunlight as testament to the Queen's supreme authority. The tableau of ivory white silk, crimson embroidery, and golden regalia imprinted vividly upon the minds of the populace, inspiring awe and reverence throughout the realm. In appearance, Catherine possessed a petite frame, standing at approximately 1.35 meters in height, with flawless, porcelain-like complexion. Her azure blue eyes radiated intelligence, and gentle kindness, reminiscent of pure sapphires, while her waist-length hair, reddish-brown with golden highlights that shimmered in the light, stood in striking contrast to the darker tresses of English women of the day. In her youthful prime, Catherine was celebrated as fairer than any creature upon this earth, a compliment recorded by Cardinal Thomas More and the historian Lord Herbert. They extolled her long, curled eyelashes, rosy lips, and perfect oval face, noting she had not a single flaw. Every gesture, movement, and garment of the Empress swiftly became the height of fashion at court. The English nobility emulated her delicate tiptoe steps, the graceful lifting of her skirts, and her dignified posture that balanced regal presence with refined femininity. Catherine favoured the rarest imported fabrics from France and Italy: Italian velvet, French silk, even Anatolian velour for her robes and elaborate gowns. She adorned her sleeves and necklines with intricately embroidered lace crafted by the royal atelier, setting a new standard for English couture from the palace to grand royal balls. Beyond the pomegranate, Catherine's queenly symbolism was further embodied by two traditional regalia, the sceptre and the orb. The sceptre signified sacred authority, representing the queen's duty to uphold justice, chastise wrongdoers, and protect her subjects. The orb symbolized the cosmos, affirming that the Empress's power was sanctioned by all creation under God. Together with the crown, this triad of regalia not only demonstrated supreme rank, but also underscored Catherine's role as the perfect consort, a graceful yet formidable bridge between heaven and earth, between divine right and temporal rule. All the details of the coronation ceremony, attire, and iconography forged an indelible image of Empress Catherine of Aragon as an enduring emblem of Tudor power and prosperity. She was not merely the royal spouse, but a steadfast pillar of the dynasty, helping usher in a golden era in English history. Immediately after becoming queen, Catherine of Aragon joyfully announced her first pregnancy on the 31st of January in the year 1510, causing great excitement throughout the court. The ladies-in-waiting and court physicians held a small Thanksgiving ceremony at Greenwich Palace, preparing restorative tonics and a bespoke nutritional menu for her. From the spacious oak-panelled bedchamber to the red velvet draperies, every detail of Catherine's resting quarters spoke of careful preparation and hopeful anticipation for a male heir. Yet as her due date approached, the Queen endured excruciating labour pains and hemorrhaging, only to be heartbreakingly informed that the child, a daughter, had been stillborn. In an instant, the court's festive atmosphere turned to mourning, and a discreet burial for the fetus took place in the royal gardens. Catherine grieved in silence, but quietly reminded herself to remain patient in accordance with her motto, humble and loyal, as she faced her first great loss. Fewer than 4 months later, she embarked upon her second pregnancy and gave birth to Prince Henry, Duke of Cornwall, on the 1st of January in the year 1511. The joyous news spread swiftly. Mourning flags were lowered along the approach to Windsor Castle, and attendants distributed cakes and gifts to the commoners. Triumphal drums heralded the infant's procession in a gilded litter through the castle gates. Yet only 52 days afterward, in mid-February of that same year, a sudden fever claimed the young prince's life. Once more, the court was engulfed in sorrow. Mourning veils draped the chapel walls, and Catherine collapsed, clutching her son's portrait as tears streamed down her face. In the year 1513, while King Henry VIII campaigned in France, Catherine assumed full regental authority alone. Amid the political storms, she learned with renewed hope that she was expecting again. Courtiers whispered of the Queen's radiant countenance as she walked steadily across the red-tiled courtyard, her hands gently cradling her rounded belly. However, in the heat of midsummer, she delivered a premature son who survived only a few hours. His swift departure left Catherine stunned, and she sought to comfort his spirit through successive nights of masses and requiem prayers. When summer of the year 1514 arrived, Catherine became pregnant for the fourth time. Trumpets once again announced the news. The king commanded the royal seal be pressed upon a medical proclamation, and court apothecaries prepared daily restorative elixirs. Yet the joy was fleeting. The queen gave birth to another son, only to discover he was stillborn. He was laid to rest in the rose garden beside the abbey walls. The weight of this disappointment pressed heavily upon her heart. But Catherine concealed her grief and continued to fulfill her royal duties with unwavering resolve. In the year 1516, her fifth pregnancy bore fruit at last with the safe birth of Princess Mary Tudor on the 18th of February. Tidings of her arrival spread through the realm. A grand naming ceremony was held at Westminster Abbey. Offerings were made to the guardian angels, and King Henry VIII showed a satisfied smile, though the king still harboured some disappointment at the absence of a male heir. Catherine remained steadfast. She held her daughter tenderly during the celebratory recitation of the poem Mary, Tudor's guiding light, instilling hope for a stable future among the courtiers. At the beginning of the year 1518, Catherine once again experienced the elation of a confirmed pregnancy, that of her sixth child. In the bleak midwinter, with bare branches dusted by snow outside, she clutched a vial of fragrant oil to soothe her spirit. Yet fate proved unkind. The infant daughter was born prematurely and died within hours, casting the court back into mourning. Court physicians attributed the tragedy to nutritional deficiencies and the pressures of state. But Catherine did not yield. She set aside her mourning gowns and offered a gentle, if weary, smile as she resumed her duties as queen. Over nearly a decade, Catherine of Aragon endured 7 pregnancies but bore only one surviving child. The relentless sorrow etched a profound longing in her soul. She yearned for a son to secure the Tudor succession. Each pang of labour drove her to pray before the abbey altars, beseeching divine mercy for her lineage. Though the court repeatedly teetered on the brink of a succession crisis, Catherine's reputation grew ever stronger as a symbol of dignity, perseverance, and extraordinary sacrifice. At lavish banquets, courtiers whispered of the queen's pensive gaze whenever she watched her daughter Mary growing up in the palace gardens. Catherine devoted time to teaching her daughter history and moral lessons, determined to pass on hope and resilience to the next generation. Gradually, the English court came to recognize that Mary, even as a princess, possessed the spirit and resolved to transform adversity into triumph. Catherine of Aragon's 9-year odyssey in pursuit of a male heir, marked by alternating hope and heartbreak, became a tragic yet noble chapter in England's royal annals. She was not merely the first queen of the Tudor line, but a paragon of perseverance and selflessness, demonstrating that royal authority carries with it great responsibility and an indomitable spirit. In June in the year 1513, when King Henry VIII departed England to campaign in France, Empress Catherine of Aragon was appointed regent with the title of Lord High Admiral, an office granting her full authority to manage all royal and military affairs on the king's behalf. Although she was expecting her third child, Catherine did not shelter safely within the palace walls. Instead, she swiftly demonstrated military acumen and a rare resoluteness for a reigning queen. At her command, Governor-General Thomas Lovell was summoned without delay to muster the army and fortify defences against the Scottish invasion. Cavalry units received orders to march north, while artillery and archers stood ready. Most crucially, Catherine organised a rapid response support detachment provisioned with food, medicine, and war horses. She donned a lightweight suit of armour, mounted her steed, and rode at full gallop along rugged roads straight to the troop encampment. There, she demanded that the blood-stained badge of King James IV of Scotland, recently slain, to be retrieved and sent to the royal court as a prized trophy to bolster morale and showcase victory over France. The sight of the Queen amid thundering hooves, banners snapping in the wind, and drums rolling across the field became an enduring symbol of her fearless leadership. When soldiers glimpsed her riding through the ranks, gripping the bloody emblem of the fallen foe, their spirits soared, leading to resounding triumph at the Battle of Flodden. Upon receiving word of the victory, Henry VIII penned a letter lauding Catherine as the most stalwart regent in all of Europe, affirming that she equalled any male commander. Fewer than 3 years later, in the summer of 1520, His Imperial Majesty Charles V, Catherine's grandson and future King of Spain, visited England on a complex political mission. Aware of the strategic value of a strong alliance with the Empire, Catherine persuaded King Henry to shift diplomatic priority away from France. She hosted a grand banquet at Hampton Court, inviting Charles to partake of courtly tea and examine border maps. Before assembled ministers from both realms, she emphasized that an imperial alliance would strengthen England against hostile powers and pave the way to safeguard Princess Mary from French influence. That same year's diplomatic apex was the Field of the Cloth of Gold, held near Calais, a gathering of the two monarchs and their courts. Catherine stood beside Henry, beneath dozens of luxurious golden tents, where England and France competed in tournaments of horsemanship, wrestling, and sumptuous feasts. She wore a gown woven from the finest Italian silk, embroidered with phoenixes and Tudor roses, projecting both regal authority and refined taste. In the presence of Francis I of France and Charles V, Catherine served as cultural mediator, explaining ceremonial protocol and translating congratulatory toasts in Latin and Spanish. Yet after those shining days of diplomacy, another storm blew into her life. The arrival of Anne Boleyn, a gifted, graceful woman and the king's childhood companion. Anne had once served as a lady-in-waiting to Catherine, deftly skilled in court etiquette and distinguished by her dark hair and sharp features. At courtly dances, Henry increasingly sought Anne's company, bestowing upon her affectionate glances, quite unlike his formerly grave demeanour toward Catherine. Nonetheless, Catherine maintained an air of gracious nobility in her dealings with Anne Boleyn. According to tradition, when Anne was distressed over fears of losing the king's favour, Catherine gently comforted her. "Pray, and time shall reveal what is just." She reminded her prospective daughter-in-law that divine grace favours the patient, explaining that humble and loyal was not merely a motto, but a guiding principle for every trial within the palace. Though outwardly serene, Catherine's heart gradually drained of hope. She noted that Henry no longer greeted her with tender smiles, leisurely strolls in the summer gardens, or the heartfelt letters penned in purple ink. Instead, the king grew ever closer to Anne Boleyn, an enthralling, enigmatic new affection that set the court abuzz with speculation. From the Chancellor's chamber to the Grand Hall, ministers sipped afternoon tea and whispered, "Does Catherine realize she is about to lose her place?" Yet Catherine continued to project confidence, appearing at ceremonies in resplendent robes, hosting foreign ambassadors, and bestowing honours upon her generals. Deep inside, however, she understood that the court was turning a new page, one in which she would no longer hold the starring role. Catherine's tenure as regent and her direction of grand diplomatic affairs concluded with glorious victories, but also marked the beginning of a profound internal crisis, the king's illicit passion for Anne Boleyn. As the political stakes grew ever more ruthless, her heart wavered between her duties as queen and the dread of being cast aside. The story of England's first Tudor wife thus emerges as both harrowing and heroic, leaving an indelible imprint on the annals of the Tudor dynasty. In the month of June in the year 1513, when King Henry VIII departed England to conduct a campaign in France, Empress Catherine of Aragon was appointed acting regent with the title Lord High Admiral, an office that empowered her to govern all royal and military affairs on behalf of the king. Though she was pregnant with her third child, Catherine did not seek refuge behind palace walls. On the contrary, she swiftly demonstrated rare military talent and unwavering resolve for a reigning queen. Immediately upon her directive, Governor-General Thomas Lovell was summoned to muster the army and strengthen defences against the Scottish invasion. Cavalry regiments were ordered to march north, while artillery units and archers made ready. Most importantly, Catherine commissioned a rapid response support detachment equipped with provisions of food, medicine, and war horses. She personally donned a lightweight suit of armour, mounted her steed, and rode at full gallop over rugged roads to the soldiers' encampment. There, she ordered that the bloodied badge of King James IV of Scotland, recently slain in battle, to be retrieved and sent back to the royal court as a prized war trophy to bolster morale and celebrate victory over France. The sight of the Empress emerging among the thunder of hooves and the fluttering of banners, with drums rolling, a martial cadence, became an enduring symbol of her courageous leadership. Soldiers who witnessed her gallop through the ranks, gripping the sanguine emblem of their fallen enemy, had their spirits uplifted, leading to resounding triumph at the Battle of Flodden. When Henry VIII received word of the victory, he wrote to acclaim Catherine as the most stalwart regent in all of Europe, affirming that she rivaled any male commander. Fewer than 3 years later, in the summer of the year 1520, His Imperial Majesty Charles V, Catherine's grandson and future King of Spain, visited England on a delicate political mission. Recognizing the strategic importance of a robust alliance with the Empire, Catherine persuaded King Henry to shift diplomatic priority away from France. She hosted a grand banquet at Hampton Court, inviting Charles to partake of courtly tea and to study border maps. In the presence of assembled ministers from both realms, Catherine emphasized that an alliance with the Empire would strengthen England against hostile powers and would also help safeguard Princess Mary from undue French influence. That year's diplomatic high point was the Field of the Cloth of Gold, held near Calais, a spectacular gathering of the two monarchs and their courts. Catherine stood alongside Henry beneath dozens of sumptuous golden tents, where England and France competed in displays of horsemanship, wrestling, and extravagant feasts. She wore a gown of the finest Italian silk, embroidered with phoenixes and Tudor roses, evincing both regal authority and refined taste. Before Francis I of France and Charles V, Catherine served as cultural liaison, explaining ceremonial protocols and translating congratulatory toasts in Latin and Spanish. Yet after those shining days of diplomacy, another storm darkened her life. The emergence of Anne Boleyn, a talented, graceful woman who had once been the king's childhood companion. Anne had served as one of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting, distinguished by her keen understanding of court etiquette and her dark hair and striking features. At courtly dances, Henry increasingly sought Anne's company, bestowing upon her affectionate glances that were in stark contrast to his formerly solemn demeanour toward Catherine. Despite this, Catherine maintained an air of gracious nobility in her interactions with Anne Boleyn. According to tradition, when Anne despaired at the prospect of losing the king's favour, Catherine gently reassured her. "Pray, and time shall reveal what is just." She reminded her future daughter-in-law that divine grace favours the patient, explaining that humble and loyal was not merely a motto, but a guiding principle for every trial within the palace. Though outwardly composed, Catherine's heart gradually emptied of hope. She noticed that Henry no longer greeted her with tender smiles, leisurely walks in the summer gardens, or the heartfelt letters penned in ink of violet hue. Instead, the king grew ever closer to Anne Boleyn, an enthralling, mysterious new affection that set the court abuzz with speculation. From the Chancellor's chambers to the Grand Hall, ministers sipped afternoon tea and whispered, "Does Catherine realize she is about to lose her place?" Yet Catherine continued to project confidence, appearing at ceremonies in resplendent robes, receiving foreign ambassadors, and bestowing honours upon her generals. Deep within, however, she understood that the court was turning a new page, one in which she would no longer be the leading figure. Catherine's tenure as regent and her orchestration of great diplomatic affairs concluded in glorious victories, but also marked the beginning of a profound internal crisis. Henry's illicit passion for Anne Boleyn, as the political stakes grew ever more ruthless. Her heart wavered between her duties as queen and the dread of being cast aside. The story of England's first Tudor wife thus unfolds as both heroic and heartbreaking, leaving an indelible imprint on the annals of the Tudor dynasty. Second wife, Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn was a noblewoman full of ambition and grace who electrified the Tudor court. She was born circa 1501 into the distinguished Boleyn family. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, had served as England's ambassador to France, while her mother, Lady Elizabeth Howard, hailed from an eminent noble lineage. As a child, Anne was sent to France to study. She honed her skills in music and dance, acquired knowledge of history and Latin grammar, and mastered aristocratic pursuits such as embroidery, horsemanship, and hunting. Of medium build, with a slightly tanned complexion, thick black hair, and shimmering dark eyes, she frequently impressed the French court, presenting a striking contrast to the conventional appearance of the London court. Anne's personal emblem was a hawk perched upon a tree stump, entwined with red and white Tudor roses, a motto symbolizing the unity of the Tudor dynasty. Blending the Lancaster and York roses, this image later adorned badges and heraldic devices, and it appeared on small banners along the approach to Hampton Court. The interwoven roses represented loyalty and also signalled Anne's growing political ambition. Her journey from lady-in-waiting to a prominent candidate for queenship, the title Marquess of Pembroke, was bestowed upon Anne in the year 1532, an unexpected honour preceding her formal status as queen. This title not only elevated her rank and prestige among the nobility, but also mollified critics who viewed her as a social upstart. Granting her a marquisate placed her on par with minor dukes and dispersed doubts about her relationship with the king. While kindling hopes for a future queen of talent and influence, Anne's allure extended beyond her heraldic splendour to her exquisite fashion sense and diplomatic finesse. She often appeared at courtly dances in garments woven from the finest French silk, embroidered with Tudor roses and golden hawks. Her combination of elegance and sharp wit quickly made her a symbol of refined rebellion against the stodgy norms of the English court. At diplomatic receptions, she graciously hosted foreign ambassadors, demonstrating intimate knowledge of court protocol and skillfully conveying goodwill between foreign envoys and the crown, thereby expanding her sphere of influence. Before meeting Henry VIII, Anne had served intimately as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon. She once refused the king's advances, preserving her honour and leaving a powerful impression on Henry of her integrity and resilience. This courteous refusal elicited his admiration and deep respect, a stark contrast to his fleeting early romances. Their initial association, founded on purity and principle, laid the groundwork for a new chapter in royal history. By the end of the year 1526, rumours swirled throughout the court that Anne had captured the king's heart. When the rumours erupted, Henry publicly displayed his affection. He invited her to royal hunting parties, bestowed lavish jewellery upon her, and penned letters of ardent devotion. Anne's meteoric rise enraged Queen Catherine, sparking a sensational divorce campaign aimed at eliminating Anne's influence and protecting the monarchy's integrity. Henry's annulment efforts cleared the path for Anne's ascension, but they also triggered religious and legal upheaval that led England toward its own form of Anglicanism. With each step toward the throne, Anne astutely cultivated relationships with reformist clergy and nobles who supported independence from Rome. She personally persuaded key parliamentarians with a blend of gentle charm and unwavering conviction, transforming a clandestine romance into a catalyst for political revolution. Anne's position at the pinnacle of power made her not only the king's emotional confidant, but also the subject of heated debate over women's roles in governance. She became a symbol of change, inspiring hopes for a more dynamic and open monarchy. Yet the closer she came to glory, the fiercer the opposition from conservative factions who viewed her as a threat to tradition. Anne Boleyn's journey from elegant lady-in-waiting to Marquess of Pembroke, and ultimately Queen Consort, is a tale of drama and contradiction. She skillfully leveraged her beauty, intellect, and patience to overcome countless barriers. Yet she could not entirely evade the snares of power. In the next section, we will explore the clandestine wedding and coronation of Anne, as well as the tragic end awaiting her at the Tower of London. At the end of January in the year 1533, King Henry VIII quietly enlisted the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, to declare his marriage to Catherine of Aragon null and void. Everything was handled discreetly, in strict confidence, and with the consent of a handful of trusted clerics. A papal dispensation was drafted to affirm that the first marriage had never been consummated, and was therefore not legally binding. On the 25th of January in the year 1533, the feast of St. Paul Henry and Anne Boleyn were privately wed at Greenwich Palace. The ceremony was so unostentatious that only a small circle of senior courtiers attended, a few cardinals, a few earls, and the clergy from the Archbishop's household. There were no lavish robes or elaborate court rituals. Instead, the two newlyweds stood before a modest altar in the chapel, exchanged rings, and recited their vows before God. That secret wedding laid the foundation for a union that would shock all of Europe. More than 4 months later, on the 1st of June in the year 1533, Anne Boleyn's coronation was celebrated with great pomp at Westminster Abbey. The public witnessed a spectacle unlike any before. The royal guard in full regalia leading the procession, fireworks illuminating the sky, and Anne walking beside Henry beneath the magnificent stone arches. She wore Edward's crown, formerly reserved only for a queen consort, and, for the first time, it was placed upon the head of a woman chosen solely by the king. Despite its splendor, Anne's coronation provoked fierce public outrage. Outside the abbey, crowds gathered to jeer and mock her as she donned a radiant golden robe, a color once deemed the joy in Catherine's funeral. People shouted jests such as "gold for her," "black for Catherine," and "a new queen? Mere folly." The jeers and laughter mingled oddly with the distant trumpets, creating a scene both absurd and somber. Undeterred by public opinion, Henry VIII promptly escorted Anne back to Greenwich Palace immediately after the coronation. There, she was granted countless privileges: the title Queen Consort with all attendant rights, a private royal residence, and a generous allowance. She alone was permitted to attend the king at private banquets. Princes and foreign ambassadors alike had to await her direct command before presenting their credentials. In the early months of the year 1533, Anne leveraged her newfound influence to restore diplomatic ties with the Holy Roman Empire and the papacy. She tirelessly penned letters to Emperor Charles V, Catherine's nephew, urging the renewal of the traditional alliance, while sending discreet missives to European monarchs on behalf of a stable, independent England. Simultaneously, Anne championed a moderate religious reform, encouraging Henry to distance himself from Roman ecclesiastical control without alienating English Catholics. Only weeks after suffering through the sweating sickness epidemic, Anne was cared for by Thomas Wolsey at Kingston. She sent him a most gracious letter of thanks. "Your Eminence, I offer my deepest gratitude for your kindness and devoted care in my hours of need. May God bless you and your household." Oh, Beau! This letter not only conveyed her heartfelt appreciation, but also marked Anne as a bridge between the crown and the royal lineage, a subtle signal to reform-minded clergy that she sought harmony between throne and faith. Anne's influence also reshaped the court itself. She promoted a new cadre of young, educated, and loyal officials who favored separation from Rome. Conservative ministers suddenly found their positions weakened, yielding ground to the reformist faction and accelerating the establishment of the Church of England This policy gave Henry VIII the legal basis to declare himself supreme head of the Church of England, ending the Pope's authority in his realm. Yet power brought challenges. Many dukes and earls quietly opposed Anne, accusing her of scheming her way into the court and deeming her unworthy of the throne. Some even alleged her involvement in persecuting Roman Catholic clergy. Amid this hostility, Anne maintained her composure at diplomatic receptions, greeting guests with a smile and continuing to advance her foreign policy. Anne Boleyn's clandestine marriage, contentious coronation, and initial political maneuvers sent shockwaves through English history. She was far more than the king's consort. She was the driving force behind religious reform and the Tudor realignment of European alliances. Yet, hidden intrigues in the royal household were already stirring, promising the tragedies and dramas that would soon unfold. On the 7th of September, in the year 1533, Anne gave birth to Princess Elizabeth at Greenwich Palace. Instead of the long-awaited joy of a male heir, she delivered a frail, underweight daughter, prompting all ceremonies and festivities for the prince's birth to be cancelled at once. For generations, the court and the English populace had regarded the birth of a son as the Queen's supreme duty. When that hope was dashed, they did not hesitate to show their contempt. Crowds gathered outside the palace, booing and jeering, calling the child the Tudor jest, and Anne's resplendent golden robe the garment of grief. Henry, though striving to maintain composure, could not hide his disappointment. He gradually grew distant from his wife, his gaze turning instead to his cousin Catherine Howard, later Jane Seymour, a discreet, gentle lady, believed capable of bearing a son. Not only did Anne struggle with reproductive disappointment, but she also faced a hardline Catholic resurgence among the conservative faction. Officials loyal to Queen Catherine of Aragon and opposed to religious reform openly harboured hostility toward her. They sought to undermine Anne's reputation by any means, from smearing her character to spreading rumours of adultery with her brother George Boleyn. By the midsummer of 1536, such malicious gossip about illicit liaisons had swept through the court like plague, sparking the arrest of the Queen's associates. Sir Henry Norris, Sir Francis Weston, Sir William Brereton, and especially George Boleyn, Anne's beloved brother, were all accused of incest, adultery, and treason. In the month of May, in the year 1536, a formal indictment listing grave charges was publicly announced. Anne was accused of adultery with multiple high-ranking courtiers, even her own brother, and of plotting to unseat the king in favour of a loyal faction. She was immediately confined, stripped of all titles and privileges, including the right to raise her daughter Elizabeth. The lavish banquets and grand receptions of the past gave way to a cold, silent court. Palace doors were slammed shut, leaving only the echo of proclamations and the footsteps of guards. Little Elizabeth, barely weeks old, was denied her mother's presence and placed under the care of governesses and ladies-in-waiting. As Anne faced her final days in isolation and suspicion, the royal security forces adopted rigorous containment measures. All of Anne's correspondence was censored. Visitors were interrogated, and she was moved constantly between secondary residences. The ordinary days she once knew became an unbroken vigil. With no access to friends or advisors, the betrayal by those who had once hailed her as the new queen cut Anne to the quick. She wondered whether she had truly betrayed the king or had become the pawn of a sinister political conspiracy. Across England, the court buzzed with speculation about the impending trial. Conservatives scoured for evidence, while reformers found themselves unsure whom to support. Little Elizabeth, though of Tudor blood, became a bargaining chip in the dispute. Many feared that if her mother fell, the princess's own claim to the throne would be imperiled. Yet in her darkest hour, Anne held her head high. Trusting in justice and virtue, she prepared a final statement of defence. "I have never rebelled nor sullied the royal bed. If I must die for love and honour, I stand ready to embrace my fate." End 1. The first dramatic turns of Anne Boleyn's crisis marked the end of her lavish romance with Henry VIII. Once brilliant glory faded into the shadows of scandal and indictment. Behind the palace curtain, the tragic final act was about to begin, promising a sensational trial and a devastating conclusion for the woman once hailed as mother of a new dynasty. End 1. On the 12th of May in the year 1536, the trial of the nobleman George Boleyn and 5 gentlemen close to the Queen took place at Westminster Hall. The ancient palace was thronged with courtiers, soldiers, and representatives of the church. Yet among them only George was brought before justice and sentenced to death. The others, Sir Henry Norris, Sir Francis Weston, Sir William Brereton, Sir Thomas Wyatt, and Sir William Kingston, though likewise accused, were ultimately pardoned or had their sentences commuted, while George Anne's beloved brother was left to await the scaffold. Only a few hours after George was condemned, Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, was ordered arrested and taken to the Tower of London to stand trial. The cobblestone road from Westminster Palace to the Black Tower became a procession of guards, knights, and courtiers in hushed formation. Among them was Thomas Cromwell, now the King's chief minister, who oversaw the proceedings with cold determination. Convinced that Anne posed a mortal threat to the realm, Anne's emergency trial lasted only a few brief days, but was staged with elaborate care. Within the gloomy stone walls of the tower, she sat upon a small raised platform facing a court composed of high-ranking nobles and clerics loyal to Catherine of Aragon. The indictment listed 3 principal charges: treason for conspiring rebellion, incest with her brother George, and adultery with multiple courtiers, accusations that branded her as both a defiler of the crown and a shame to the royal household. The entire proceeding resembled a political drama, orchestrated to serve the king's personal agenda and to quash Anne's reformist influence. Though fully aware that the charges were founded on rumour and slander, Anne maintained the composure of a queen. She denied each allegation, asserting that her marriage to Henry VIII was genuine and entirely pure. In her final statement to the court, she proclaimed, "I have never committed treason nor defiled the royal bed. If any crime be proven, I willingly accept the punishment." Her courageous stance moved many to silent admiration, though it could not alter her fate. Even those who had once championed her cause were forced into retreat. Some courtiers pleaded on her behalf, but Thomas Cromwell rebuffed every entreaty. Within days, Anne was formally convicted. When the trial concluded, she was escorted back to her cell, where cold stone walls and the creaking of the lock replaced the warmth of royal favour. On the morning of the 19th of May, in the year 1536, the Tower of London stood shrouded in thick mist. Guards hurried to prepare the block, the execution platform beneath the gnarled limbs of ancient trees. At dawn, Anne was led into the courtyard wearing a gown of rich ash-grey silk. Though her eyes were veiled, she still radiated the noble bearing of a queen who had once brightened the court. On the block, Anne kneeled upright, her hands clasped before her chest, her gaze fixed toward the eastern sunrise. She proclaimed her innocence aloud 4 times. "I declare before God and this court that I have not been a traitor, that I have not defiled the royal bed with any man, and that I have not committed incest." Each oath rang out in the early mist, pausing the ceremonial executioner's sword until she finished. After her final declaration, Anne lay prostrate and bowed her head in prayer for the king and kingdom. At that moment, the royal swordsman, a specialist summoned from France, stepped forward and raised his gleaming, finely honed blade. With a single stroke, the sword passed swiftly through her neck without hesitation. Anne's blood spurted, staining the stone as it fell, closing a tragic chapter in Tudor history. When the sword's thunderous echo faded, the Queen's body was lowered and swiftly shrouded in white cloth. There was no grand royal ceremony. She was placed in a simple wooden coffin to await burial. In that moment of mourning, the nuns of St. Peter Advincula gathered around, chanting prayers for the soul of one who had once been a mighty queen. Anne Boleyn's remains were temporarily interred in the chapel of St. Plain, Peter Advincula, within the Tower grounds. Her grave was unmarked, bearing no name. Few knew that upon that spot rested a mother, a queen, and a symbol of reform. It was not until the Victorian era, when historical records were rediscovered and studied, that a headstone was engraved with the words, "Anne, Queen of England," ensuring her memory for future generations. The death of Anne Boleyn not only ended a deeply personal tragedy, but also ushered in a dark era for the Tudor monarchy. Her fate from dazzling heights to a sudden execution remains etched in history as a warning about the perils of power and destiny. Though the court eventually regained stability, the image of Anne falling beneath the executioner's sword endures as both a complete tragedy and a testament to the courage and integrity of the woman once celebrated as the mother of a new dynasty. The third wife of King Henry VIII, Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour was born in the year 1508 at Wolf Hall in Wiltshire, and embodied humility and loyalty. Jane Seymour was born into the distinguished Seymour family as the daughter of Sir John Seymour and Marjorie Wentworth, although the exact date of her birth was not recorded. Many historians estimate that she was born in early 1508 at Wolf Hall, the Seymour family estate in Wiltshire. From childhood, Jane displayed a gentle, reserved demeanour, of average stature, standing about 1.5 meters tall, with a pale complexion and light brown hair falling to her shoulders. Her grey, contemplative eyes conveyed a depth of thought and kindness that put all who met her at ease. Unlike the king's first two wives, who had received extensive education in languages and philosophy, Jane's schooling was basic but comprehensive in the aristocratic feminine arts, exquisite embroidery, household management, and court etiquette. She also learned to ride horses, hunt, and practice calligraphy skills that won admiration from the royal ladies. Her lineage only reinforced her suitability as an ideal consort. As a descendant of King Edward III, she possessed the enduring nobility of England's ancient line. In her youth, Jane served Queen Catherine of Aragon at court. When Anne Boleyn became the centre of royal drama and her relationship with Henry VIII deteriorated, Jane gradually emerged as the king's comforting haven. On many occasions, Henry visited Hever Castle, Jane's childhood home, sending precious provisions, European herbs, and medicines to support her during the sweating sickness outbreak in 1528. Jane responded with heartfelt letters to Thomas Wolsey, expressing her gratitude and respect. When Anne fell from favour, Henry moved swiftly to fiancée Jane. On the 20th of May in 1536, just one day after Anne's arrest, Henry formally betrothed himself to Jane at Whitehall Palace. The simple ceremony was witnessed only by a handful of earls and guards. They exchanged rings and vowed before God. Although the event was discreet, it marked the beginning of a new era for the monarchy. On the 30th of May that same year, Jane and Henry held their public wedding in the council chamber before representatives of the Church of England and the entire court. Just days later, on the 4th of June, Jane Seymour's coronation took place at Westminster Abbey on a modest scale due to the ongoing plague. Despite the scaled-back proceedings, she was anointed and crowned, officially becoming Queen Consort. Immediately upon her accession, Jane captured the hearts of the people with her kindness and compassion. She showed maternal affection for Princess Mary Tudor, Catherine's daughter, and petitioned the king to pardon participants in the Pilgrimage of Grace uprising in 1536. Helping to ease tensions in northern England, this act of mercy both healed national wounds and illustrated a rare generosity within a turbulent court. Jane also championed moderate religious reform. She persuaded Henry to issue a decree establishing public hospitals in London and York to care for plague victims and the poor. Simultaneously, she supported the founding of charitable academies, providing scholarships for sons of common families and enabling young people to pursue education and escape poverty. Her policies won praise from both courtiers and commoners, who regarded her as the mother of the people. In diplomacy, Jane displayed natural finesse. She received foreign ambassadors in the royal chambers, adhering strictly to courtly protocol and meeting aristocratic expectations. She gauged her guests' temperaments, listened attentively, and responded with humble yet decisive counsel, thereby strengthening England's relations with France and the Holy Roman Empire. Her diplomatic correspondence was noted for its gentle persuasiveness, skillfully defending national interests without provoking conflict. In matters of fashion, Jane favoured English silk and imported Italian velvet in muted tones such as cobalt blue and pale lavender. Her garments were embroidered with Tudor roses and laurel leaves in silver thread, evoking grace without ostentation. Accessories such as pearl hairpins and emerald necklaces, selected by her personal hand, became symbols of humility and intellect. Whenever she appeared in public, she was likened to a blossoming flower in the royal court, elegant and profound. However, peace was not to last. As Jane entered her first pregnancy, conservative voices speculated about her ability to bear a male heir. Rumours circulated that she lacked the qualifications to mother a prince, yet Jane remained steadfast in faith, calmly preparing for the birth, trusting in the king's love and the miracle of destiny. She once confided to a lady-in-waiting, "If only a healthy son is born, the throne shall endure forever." Jane Seymour's journey from humble lady-in-waiting to queen consort is a tale of virtue, sacrifice, and diplomatic skill. She won the affection of Henry VIII and the admiration of the realm through her sincerity and benevolence. In the next section, we will follow Jane's eagerly anticipated months of pregnancy and the tragic events that led to the unexpected end of England's third queen. Immediately upon her accession as queen consort, Jane Seymour quickly won the heart of King Henry VIII with her gentle devotion and tender care. In early 1537, only 8 months after her coronation, Jane Seymour formally announced to the court that she was expecting her first child. This joyful news spread throughout the Tudor realm, rekindling long-held hopes for a male heir. At Hampton Court, where the Queen rested securely, royal physicians were ordered to stand watch in rotations, closely monitoring her condition. They combined blood-tonic herbal remedies with gentle acupuncture treatments and devised a regimen of light exercise strolls through the palace gardens, stretching routines, and meditation to maintain her optimal health without endangering the unborn child. Throughout her pregnancy, Jane abstained from all strenuous activity. She spent many hours reading prayers in the small private chapel, sustaining her peace of mind and preparing herself spiritually for motherhood. In the afternoons, she wrote letters to her Seymour relatives, sharing her feelings and receiving the encouragement of her parents and siblings. These frequent correspondences eased her loneliness and reinforced her awareness of her family's eager expectations. Yet, though calmer in spirit, Jane could not hide her anxiety whenever she felt the first faint contractions, ominous signs of the arduous journey ahead. By early autumn of 1537, Jane began to show signs of early labour. From the 10th to the 12th of September, she endured persistent, dull contractions, fatigue, and chills. Still, the Queen maintained a positive outlook, gently reassuring her devoted ladies-in-waiting. "Do not worry, everything will be well when our child arrives safely," she would say. Royal attendants stood vigil at her bedside, ready with warm cloths and vials of herbal tonic, and a specially reinforced birthing bed was brought in to support her. The private chamber at Hampton Court was softly lit by candles and scented with jasmine, Jane's favourite flower, to calm her nerves. Finally, at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning on the 12th of October in 1537, Jane Seymour delivered a robust son. By flickering candlelight, his first cries rang out like a triumphant anthem. The infant was swiftly named Edward and granted the title Prince of Cornwall, assuring firm hope for the Tudor succession. King Henry VIII having stayed awake through the night, could not contain his emotion as he held his son for the first time. Together, before a modest altar, they knelt in thanksgiving to God for this precious gift to the realm. However, happiness gave way to tragedy before dawn's light. Jane grew profoundly pale and developed a dangerously high fever. Despite the royal physician's continued use of blood tonic herbs, acupressure, and acupuncture, her condition worsened. Sweats drenched her gown as fever spikes persisted through 2 days and nights. Attendants and doctors took her temperature and pulse by the hour. It seemed her body could not overcome a severe infection. Yet Jane remained lucid long enough to cradle her newborn. Giving Edward one final loving glance, she whispered to Louis, her closest attendant, "Care for my son in my place. May God bless Edward and keep him strong." As dawn broke, Jane slipped into unconsciousness. Catherine Pantler, the senior sister of the royal convent, led a quiet rite of commemoration, reading prayers and strewing white rose petals around Jane's bed. Although occupied with pressing diplomatic matters, Henry VIII never left his wife's side. Holding her hand through the long hours, he murmured softly, "I love you. Forever I love you." Yet her fragile life could not withstand that cruel malady. That afternoon, Jane exhaled her final breath in the arms of her young son. Edward, no triumphant trumpet sounded. Only the sobs of the ladies-in-waiting and the sighs of the palace guards filled the hush. Henry's first royal decree was to declare a court-wide mourning. His ladies were instructed to wear dark purple. White rose garlands lined the corridors, and all prisoners were pardoned for a single day. Jane's body was laid upon a richly carved oak bed, draped in pristine white linen before being conveyed to St. White, George's Chapel at Windsor. The heartbreaking death of Jane Seymour, only 2 weeks after giving birth to Prince Edward, left a wound that the King and Tudor dynasty would never forget. Though her life was brief, she fulfilled the sacred duty of bearing a male heir, restoring hope for the Tudor line. Her memory endures in English verse and tragic legend as a symbol of perfect love, devoted service, and profound sacrifice. The story of Jane Seymour, the mother who gave her very life for her son, and the crown resounds forever in royal lore. On the 24th of October, in the year 1537, Queen Jane fell into an acute comatose state due to a severe abdominal infection. The primary cause was diagnosed as endometritis, a consequence of retained placental tissue accompanied by rapidly spreading blood poisoning, although the royal physicians immediately brought every available remedy, iron tonic herbal brews, and contemporary antibiotics into her private chamber at Hampton Court, administering acupuncture and massage repeatedly. The illness progressed too swiftly. The doctors, clad in heavy robes and clutching stethoscopes, watched helplessly as she weakened day by day, sweat and blood staining the bed linens. The palace was shrouded in discreet chaos, physicians clasping their hands in silent prayer, ladies-in-waiting hastily leafing through outdated medical texts, and yeomen of the guard whispering prayers for a miracle. A funeral trumpet sounded softly to signal the Queen's critical condition, while King Henry VIII received urgent word to depart London and ride through the night to Woodstock Palace. Hoping for divine intervention, he reached the rose-adorned chamber and took Jane's hand without uttering a word, his heart heavy with remorse. In her semi-conscious state, Jane stretched out her delicate hands and managed a faint smile upon seeing Prince Edward lifted to her bedside by the ladies-in-waiting. Granting her a final glimpse of her son, court legend recounts that she softly whispered, "Please love Prince Edward as parents would, and preserve peace for England." Those were her parting words, a mother's final charge not only to her infant but to the Tudor realm. As the first morning light filtered through the chamber window, Jane drew her final breath. In that moment, the palace was enveloped in solemn silence, no laughter, no courtly music echoing through the halls, only the muffled sobs of attendants, the sighs of watchmen, and the hurried footsteps of a maid carrying a shroud to cover her face. "Edward," barely 2 weeks old, cried out in the arms of his nurses, unaware of the agony that had claimed his mother's life. News of the Queen's passing spread through the court like wildfire. From private apartments to the crimson-carpeted corridors, ladies in waiting and maidens wept inconsolably. Tears, blending with dew on the stone walls. The radiant light of her coronation seemed to be swallowed by the gloom of mourning. Henry VIII's cold decree rang out. All court members were to don white mourning robes. Thousands of white roses were to line every walkway, and all feasts and entertainments were suspended until the funeral concluded. Henry, paralyzed by grief, sank into profound sorrow. Rumor tells that upon hearing the fatal news, he collapsed in the audience chamber, his mourning cloak still unfolded, tears streaming, unrestrained like a sudden downpour. Those who had witnessed the earlier confident, unyielding king now saw him huddled in despair, his gaunt face scarcely recognizable. The palace, once echoing with triumphant drums, now heard only the mournful wind sigh through the windows. Jane's body was laid upon an ornately carved oak bed, draped in immaculate white linen before its conveyance to St. Elm, George's Chapel at Windsor. The royal funeral was conducted with solemn grandeur. Courtiers marched in 2 ranks along the stone-paved approach. The band played a mournful dirge, and Sister Pantler led the attendants of St. Peter Advincula in prayers for the gentle Queen's soul. A stark sandstone tomb awaited within the chapel wall, a temporary resting place for the late Queen. Before the burial vault, Henry VIII donned no regal attire, wearing only a simple mourning cloak, as he bid farewell to his one true wife who had fulfilled her maternal duty. He placed a single white rose, Jane's favourite, upon her grave, in poignant silence. Jane's final plea for peace and love for Edward reverberated like a sacred testament, moving all who heard it. The loss suffered by the Tudor dynasty that day was not merely the passing of a queen, but a dark hour for the entire kingdom. The hope for a sovereign born to a happy mother-son pair, for a stable reign built on love and compassion, flickered and died. Historians later recorded Jane Seymour's death as one of the greatest tragedies among the 6 marriages of Henry VIII. As the River Thames flowed quietly beneath London Bridge, Jane's fate resembled a blossom that had barely opened before withering. Yet the legacy she left a strong Prince Edward, a king who had known complete happiness, and countless acts of charity, lives on in history and the hearts of the English people. Jane Seymour's brief sacrifice stands as an enduring reminder of the power of love and the fragility of life amid the currents of power. In accordance with Queen Jane's last wishes, she was interred with the rare royal military funeral honours reserved for a queen who died during her first pregnancy. Her simpler funeral rite took place at Hampton Court, where she had spent her final days beside Prince Edward. Only representatives of the Seymour family, her elderly father, Sir John, and a few trusted brothers, along with a handful of loyal ministers and her closest ladies-in-waiting, attended. There was no triumphant military band, nor blaring drums and trumpets, only the hushed stillness of an autumn afternoon tinged with sorrow. The Queen's body lay in a plain white Franciscan habit, and her head was draped with a black velvet veil, embroidered with a phoenix, symbolizing rebirth and boundless hope. Delicately folded mourning silks lined the bier, and the court attendants replaced their elaborate headdresses with simple veils. Though the pinewood coffin bore no gilded embellishments, the carved phoenix spreading its wings conveyed the belief that Jane's spirit would rise from darkness like the mythical flower blooming after the storm. White rose petals were scattered around the coffin, representing the innocence and profound virtue the Queen had offered to her country. On the 12th of November, in the year 1537, the Queen's remains were solemnly conveyed from Hampton Court to St. George's Chapel at Windsor, in a dignified procession. The court wore white mourning robes, stepping slowly through the wind-swept cloisters as if keeping time to a dirge. Jane's warm oak coffin was borne by 6 knights in black gloves, the metal fittings reflecting the chapel's muted light. Atop the coffin, a low-relief phoenix faced east as though soaring toward the dawn. Although eager to bid farewell to his beloved queen in person, King Henry VIII was unable to attend due to pressing diplomatic obligations and lingering fatigue from his urgent journey. He issued strict instructions. Not a sigh is to be heard. Only a single trumpet if absolutely necessary. And no guest may attend, save by special envoy. This decree lent an even deeper solemnity to the cortege, as royal protocol must prevail even in the depth of grief. In the royal vault of Windsor, Jane's coffin was laid to rest beside that of the first Tudor queen, Catherine of Aragon. The hallowed burial place reserved for England's queens lies in a quiet corner of the chapel garden and ancient cloisters. A white marble gravestone bears the Latin epitaph, In vita potens, in morte dulcis, mighty in life, gentle in death. These words praised Jane's courage in fulfilling her duty to bear a prince and honoured the peaceful grace of her passing. Despite her elevation to queen consort and her receipt of full royal insignia, Jane Seymour remains the only wife of Henry VIII interred with this rare royal military honour, the sacrosanct funeral rites, down to every detail. Impress upon future generations that she sacrificed for her kingdom more than any other royal consort. She is remembered not for regal pomp, but for the solemn splendour of her burial, testifying to her loyalty and devotion. Around her tomb, candles and incense waft golden light over the noble Latin inscription. Pilgrims who come to pay respects customarily leave a single white rose upon the gravestone, echoing Henry's funeral ritual. It is said that each falling petal recalls her final request: peace for Prince Edward and harmony for England. In subsequent years, courtiers and historians alike referred to Jane's funeral as the new standard for royal burials. Windsor's master coffin makers still preserve the blueprint. The phoenix must be most prominent, with an ideal balance of elegance and restraint. Whenever the crown prepares to enter a distinguished soul, they look to Jane's funeral rites as the exemplar. The Seymour lineage also enshrined the tradition. On each anniversary of her interment, they send white roses and light candles in memory of the noblewoman who guided the Tudor dynasty through its darkest hours. This sentiment spread beyond court to common folk, where funeral customs continued to honour women who served the realm. Commemorating Jane Seymour became not just a rite for the body, but a spiritual ceremony preserving her legacy of peacekeeping and dynastic stewardship. Prince Edward grew with pride, carrying his mother's final instruction in his heart: love and protect England. When he ascended the throne, St. George's Chapel once more echoed with prayers not only for Jane, but for the entire Tudor lineage strengthened by her sacrifice. The sacred aura of her tomb and the noble Latin carved upon it stand as an everlasting testament to a queen who lived by her final command: steadfast loyalty to family, unwavering devotion to her country, and a peaceful departure. In the tapestry of English history, Jane Seymour is remembered not only as the mother of a king, but as a symbol of selfless dedication and sacrifice that transcended even the radiance of royal power. Despite her brief life, Jane Seymour left an indelible mark on the heart of Henry VIII and the entire realm. Immediately after her solemn funeral at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, the king issued a decree of mourning to last 2 years. At every court ceremony, from audiences with senior ministers to private banquets, Henry VIII wore a black mourning cap, never once returning to his former bright headgear. The royal physicians were likewise instructed to concoct medicines in sombre hues, from deep brown herbal tonics to dark red blood restoratives, each preparation a constant, tangible reminder of the Queen's passing. The nobility showed equal reverence. Engravings of Jane Seymour, depicted in her simple white habit and black velvet veil, embroidered with a phoenix, circulated swiftly among the drawing rooms of London and York. Poetic tributes to her virtue and sacrifice, ranging from Sir Thomas Wyatt's respectful verses to John Skelton's lyrical elegies, cast Jane as the paragon of wifely fidelity. Willing to give her life for her family and her country, it was said that anyone who beheld such an engraving or heard such a poem was moved to tears, both angered by her cruel fate and reminded of the sacred bond between mother and child. Prince Edward was entrusted to regents and exemplary governesses at Whitehall, in the Silent Palace. Jane's final letters to her father and brothers were kept under lock and key in a golden casket, alongside her black velvet mourning veil. Her small diary was often placed by the prince's cradle, ensuring the gentle presence of his mother remained ever near. Edward grew up amid this solemn warmth, comforted by stories of Jane's boundless love and by the lessons she had written in her own hand. When Edward ascended the throne as King Edward VI, he honoured his mother's memory with a statue in her name. Both her birthday and the anniversary of her death, the 24th day of October, were designated a national day of remembrance for all mothers who sacrificed for their sons. On each such day, English churches celebrated masses in her honour, and the chapel of St. George echoed with prayers dedicated to her gentle spirit. Schools and monasteries across the land joined the commemoration. Several colleges at Cambridge and Oxford established Jane Seymour scholarships, reserved for young women studying royal history and the humanities. At St. Mary's Convent in Winchester, a charitable trust bearing her name was founded to aid impoverished mothers and orphaned children. Each year, nuns and scholars gathered there to explore the life and legacy of the gentle queen, from her simple correspondence to the enduring poetic tributes. Jane's esteem even inspired geography. In the year 1600, the Berkshire authorities created a new county named Seymourshire, in tribute to her family and to the Queen who gave them a king. Seymourshire became a pilgrimage site for noble families, where they paused to lay white rose petals, Jane's emblem, upon memorial shrines. The annual White Rose Festival featured exhibits of historic manuscripts and musical performances, celebrating her spirit of sacrifice through storms and peace. Jane Seymour remains an immortal symbol of loyalty and noble self-sacrifice. In history's pages, she is remembered not merely as Henry VIII's third wife, but as a perfect mother who laid down her life for the survival of the dynasty. Modern historians still cite her final poem and letters to illustrate the power of maternal devotion and the might of a true heart. Jane's brief yet brilliant journey set a new standard for the English people, that amidst power and politics there lives a gentle heart, one that places duty and love above all fleeting glory. Her legacy, though inscribed in no gilded hall, endures through annual memorial services, white rose offerings, and whispered prayers in ancient churches. In the grand tapestry of Tudor history, Jane Seymour is the sombre motif. No one can forget a choral lament of motherhood and devoted sacrifice, echoing from Hampton Court to every corner of the realm. And whenever King Edward VI gazes upon the throne, he silently remembers the mother who bestowed upon him his greatest gift, the very gift of life. The story of the three Tudor queens, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and Jane Seymour, are three tragic vignettes of power, love, and sacrifice. Catherine remained devoted to the throne her entire life, losing her political influence, yet never her loyalty, determined to uphold her honour to the end. Anne Boleyn conquered the zenith of the royal court with her beauty and intelligence, only to fall beneath the merciless sword of politics. Jane Seymour, though beside Henry only briefly, became a magnificent symbol of maternal love and peace, giving birth to a son to continue the line and then departing in serene fulfillment. We do not merely turn the dramatic pages of royal marriages. We are also invited to ponder the values of sacrifice, patience, and soft power. Catherine waited patiently in exile amid divorce allegations. Anne faced the Roman authorities with courage, and Jane used her compassionate heart to heal her people's suffering. Each of these women wrote her own definition of love, not merely in blood-sealed vows, but in silent endurance and the willingness to face danger for the sake of faith and duty, amid countless conspiracies and machinations. Genuine love sometimes shines like a brilliant yet fragile lighthouse, easily swept away by the storm of power. Catherine, stripped of every title, clung steadfastly to her motto, humble and loyal. Anne, slandered and scorned, preserved her vow of chastity. Jane, delicate by birth, pledged her life for the prince. This is proof of the hidden strength within every heart, even when deceived or betrayed. Nothing can conquer the yearning for true love. Let these three tales guide you into the glorious memory of the Tudors, where power intertwines with tragedy, where maternal love and conjugal devotion are weighed on life's scales. As candlelight flickers and courtly music echoes in your mind, feel the solemn hush of history that every person, even at the summit of glory, cannot escape the whirl of destiny and the deep longing to be loved. Now you may close your eyes, relax your body, and take a deep breath. Let the melodies of the past, like white rose petals, gently carry you into the peaceful realm of sleep. Though modern life rushes by, this moment is yours and the secrets of royal hearts. A bridge between the day that has passed and the dreams that lie ahead. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to click like and subscribe to support the channel and inspire me to bring you more colourful, emotive bedtime history stories. Each subscription is a precious encouragement, ensuring you won't miss the next installments where we will continue to explore the remaining 3 wives of Henry VIII. Chapters full of fresh drama and surprise. Sleep well. Dream of gilded palaces and proud Tudor spirits. See you in part 2. In the next video, because 3 more queens await their stories. Good night.